This week, a number of new premiers promised to prioritise service delivery in their State of the Provinces addresses. Among them were the KwaZulu-Natal, the North West and the Eastern Cape, who all have service delivery challenges. Now, to help us analyse these provinces' challenges and promises made by their leaders, I'm joined by Professor Oscar van Heerden from the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Let's begin with the province of KwaZulu-Natal. It was Nduli's maiden address as the Premier. This is after, of course, the government of provincial unity between the IFP, the ANC, the DA and the NFP that formed a unity to govern there. How do you assess the priorities that the leadership outlined in that address?
Well, you know, the truth is that, Katlego, they concentrated on two main areas, but of course there's much more challenges than that. Then those two, the one common thread that's running through most of the provinces, as you can imagine, is the issue of unemployment, which is quite high nationally and of course reflected within the provinces. KwaZulu-Natal has a very populous province, has this problem. But secondly, the Premier also took time to outline that clearly the province also need to deal with climate change and the fact that, you know, just recently we've had 2 tornadoes rip through some of the townships in KwaZulu-Natal. We've had flooding. And as you recall, even last year, there were floodings and so on. It's becoming a common feature. And I think it was correct for the Premier to also highlight that they need to do their part in combating climate change and how they're going to ready the province for these kinds of disasters. But of course, beyond that, those were within the address, but the political issues that is also playing a part within the province is, as you say, the provincial government of national unity, and the fact that the MK party is one of the largest oppositions. It has made a significant impact nationally on the political landscape. And of course, that's also something that the government will have to contend with as they go through the next 5 years.
Right, Prof. I mean, you make mention of climate change, and the MK party criticised this address and said it was full of promises. Do you think that the government of provincial unity will find better ways to deal, like you say, with housing in relation to these floods? They make promises such as in the next 100 days, they will have 150 serviced suites that will be delivered, or rather sites, as well as breaking ground on 500 houses and rezoning 5 of the 10 land parcels for the 2022 flood victims. Does this sound feasible?
We know, for example, Katlego, if you recall, there were money made available to the city of eThekwini, the municipality there, more than R1 billion to try and address some of the immediate strife of the people of KwaZulu-Natal in and around eThekwini in particular, and they were unable to spend that money. In fact, large amounts of that money was sent back to National Treasury, which of course caused a major outcry. So it's all good and well to make the promises, to say and have good intentions, but the proof is in the pudding in terms of whether the provincial government is going to be able to implement and deliver those promises.
And a province like the KZN, where it is a coming together of different parties, do you think that the possibilities are higher because people will be held to account since they're not all coming from the same corner?
I think so. You know, there was an element of complacency, obviously, in previous years, where there was the dominance of one particular party, perhaps 2. Now we have a configuration that talks to a multi-party coalition in the province, and I do think that is going to be beneficial in terms of not only accountability and holding each other accountable, but also a sense of it's not only the ANC and the IFP that can be blamed for non-service delivery. Everyone else is now got to step up.
Of course. I mean, now moving to the Eastern Cape, they held the opening of Parliament in a rural area where the Premier's office said it was their way of getting people more interested in the workings of legislature. But this, of course, drew criticism from opposition parties such as the DA, saying that the cost to set up such a sitting was probably high and they're going to look into it. Is this an indication of a rocky start in that province?
I don't think it's a rocky start. I think that the Premier Mabuyane is quite aware, and his people around him, that it was exactly those rural votes that gave the ruling party, the ANC, more than 60% within the province. And I think this is his way of wanting to connect with those supporters, with those voters. And I do think, actually, if truth be told, I think it's a good idea for State of the Province addresses to actually move to various points within the provinces so that citizens generally can feel that it's their government and they are part of it. I think that the criticism from the opposition is unwarranted. But having said that, of course, there is an element of cost that needs to be taken into consideration.
I mean, speaking of that element of cost and maybe just looking into some of the municipalities in the Eastern Cape, the Premier does make mention of the province turning into a massive construction site with several projects that will be underway across the province, and SANRAL investing, over 50 billion rands into some road construction. But of course, 16 of the 39 municipalities in the Eastern Cape are in financial distress, with 3 district municipalities that are under administration, yet none of this was addressed.
Yes, no, this is true. I mean, there's a huge challenge that waits for this administration in the Eastern Cape. Even though they got this overwhelming mandate, I think the expectations are very high. The Mabuyane administration will have to deliver on this issue of unemployment. And it's all good and well. Again, the proof is in the pudding. Katlego. The truth is, you can say you're going to turn the province into a construction site. People are going to have that expectation. They're going to want to have jobs and restore their dignity and not be dependent only on social welfare and grants. But the administration is going to be very poignant and diligent to try and make sure that that kind of implementation happen. And it's across the areas. It's not only agriculture and tourism, it's the ocean economy, etc. Some of the criticisms from the opposition parties was that it's more of the same. It's a repeat of previous SOPAs. And so Oscar Mabuyane and his new cabinet will have to prove, not only to the opposition parties, but also to the people of the Eastern Cape, that this time they are going to put foot to the pedal and actually deliver.
Now, in the Northwest, Lazarus Mokhosi is leading a province that has been marred with corruption allegations, with a high youth unemployment rate. What would you say would be the low-hanging fruit for this Premier in order to start turning this province around?
Well, the Northwest, as you know, is one of those provinces that has quite a lot of challenges. There were a number of municipalities that was in distress and so forth. I think the biggest challenge for this new administration is to actually begin to work much more robustly with COGTA, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, to try and get a handle on making sure that those municipalities actually begin to get onto the straight and narrow. I think the low-hanging fruit in the Northwest would be within the mining sector. I think the government would be prudent to actually cooperate and find some kind of agreement with a number of the mining houses within the province to try and deliver with those communities, particularly around some of the mines and so forth. As you know, this has been a big challenge of the non-cooperation, so to speak, between provincial government and these mining houses. And I think that would be one of the low-hanging fruits. And of course, also capitalizing a bit more on tourism in terms of the Northwest and so forth. So, challenges are plenty, promises are plenty, but as I say with the SOPAs, the proof is in the pudding, and the citizens of those provinces are going to be waited with bated breath to see whether, one, is there going to be service delivery unlike previous years, but also two, is there going to be job creation so that we fix the economy?
Lastly, Prof, as an overarching principle, how much do you think the government of national unity at a national level will have an influence on many of the provinces to start turning around and to truly start working together in ensuring that services are delivered to the people, unemployment is eradicated within many of these communities, but just to see how that string will work through these provinces from a national level?
Look, before, as you know, it was an ANC thing. It was the ANC NEC, which is meeting this weekend, that would dictate what's the program of action for the provinces and liaise with their premiers and so forth. This is no longer the case. The new normal is coalition politics. The new normal is about consultations, about consensus building. And I think a number of the ministers, ANC ministers and non-ANC ministers, are going to have to work more diligently and more pointedly with the various provincial administrations. You talk of correctional services. As you know, prisons are throughout the country. Traditional affairs, with the IFP being at the helm, is throughout the country, and so on and so forth. So this is really a test for the new normal. Will it work? Can it work? And I think the relationship between the government of national unity and the provincial national unity governments are going to be pertinent to try and make this new normal actually work and give citizens the satisfaction that they are then going to be at the receiving end with service delivery and with employment.
Well, certainly, Prof, it's going to be a very long 5 years as we see the workings of that relationship. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure with having you on the show and your insights. That was Prof. Oscar van Heerden from the University of Johannesburg, giving us his analysis with the state of provinces that have happened over this past week.